Hey everyone, Scott here, better known as Norebbo, and today I'm doing a really fun new livery illustration. This is JetBlue's new Streamers livery. Actually, it's just a tail design. The JetBlue livery is pretty standard and simple, but the tail design is beautiful. The Streamers livery, you'll see as I'm going into it, it's just beautifully thought out and very well done. And as you see here, I am already in Adobe Illustrator tracing out a photo that I found. I figured that was the best way to do this. Normally I eyeball all my airline livery illustrations, but this one was a little bit more complex than the others. And I thought that if I could just go in and trace the basic shapes in splines or with splines, it might be the fastest way of doing it. And I fully admit that there may have been a better way of doing this. Something that I thought of was overlapping shapes and then just cutting out the negative portions of them and just stacking everything together. But then it got really complicated, and I thought, you know what, just tracing it is the best way to go. And the problem is that there aren't a whole lot of really good illustrations or photos of this new livery on the internet yet. So this photo that you see here is the best that I can do, and it's missing that forward lower section, so I had to just wing it. Basically it's just simple arcs and sweeps and simple shapes, and I could probably, I thought I could probably figure it out on my own, and I did. It's probably not 100% totally accurate, but I did what I could with the reference material that I had, and yeah. So as you see, I've got the basic splines drawn, and now I'm just adding thickness to the main splines and cleaning up a little bit of the secondary splines, just smoothing everything out. And when you take away the photo and you see everything in its raw form like that, you think, you know what, that doesn't really look right. Is that really the way that looks like? And, it is, because I traced the photo, and it just looks weird when you strip away all the colors and all the, the thick objects and the thick splines and just all the shapes. And it's funny how that works. But you have to take a little bit of artistic license and do whatever it takes to get things looking exactly the way that you want them. So what I'm doing, I had to think about this for a little bit as to how I was going to put it all together, but I'm basically stacking a bunch of different arcs and curves on top of one another. It's really hard to explain, but if you look at the layers palette on the left, I started at the top, which would be the bottom layer, and then I went down the vertical stabilizer and added another shape on top of that one. So it's really convoluted, and there are many layers, but it all smooths out when you get to the end product. I probably could have gone in and taken the time to trim out the negative spaces and had really clean cut lines and everything, but I thought that if I stacked everything, I could go back and I could make minor adjustments here and there without too much difficulty. And that's the key, really, when you're doing these livery designs, because when you create the actual livery itself, whether it's in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever you're using, it looks fine when you trace a photo, but sometimes when you place it on the aircraft itself, it doesn't look so good. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. So now I'm back in Photoshop. I've pasted in the Vector Smart object, and I do a clipping mask on the vertical stabilizer, so it's confined within that shape. And very quickly, I saw that it wasn't quite right. If you look at the very bottom of the vertical stabilizer and where it meets the fuselage, at least in the back portion, the design that I created in Adobe Illustrator didn't quite match with the actual photo of the aircraft itself. I don't know how that happened because I traced the photo exactly, but that's just somehow... that's just the way it goes sometimes. You just have to be flexible and just be willing to go in there and make changes and make modifications where necessary. And this really saved my butt, because if I would have trimmed out each of those arcs individually and made that as clean as possible, it would have been extremely difficult to modify and change it even slightly, because I'd have to change so many different strokes and so many different lines. But because I overlapped everything and I have overlapping objects, I could just adjust one spline and then adjust the way that they overlap. So I know it sounds complicated, but it's just, that's the way I did it. And I'm sure that there's other people that create this livery. When they do it, they're going to do it a different way, and I'm sure that the original designers, when they created it, they did it their own way. What I'm suspecting what they did is they had just a bunch of different wavy shapes, and they just overlapped them, then used transparency, and then once they got something they liked, they just placed it on the vertical stabilizer, and then they trimmed everything away, and they got it. So the way I did it was completely backwards. I know, but I'm just a backwards kind of guy, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, the rest of the JetBlue livery design is very simple. I've got the tail done now, and I'm stealing from another JetBlue A321 illustration that I used. By the way, if you want this template, go over to my website, Norebbo.com. There's a link in the description below. You can get this Airbus A321LR template of your own for free, at least the low resolution JPEGs, and then I also have the high resolution PSDs and vectors if you want them too. So yeah, little details now, working on the winglet. And again, I couldn't find any good reference material for that. This livery has just been out in the wild for about 2 weeks now at the time of this video recording. So yeah, I just couldn't really find anything. I found something that was very low resolution and not very crisp. So I just used some artistic license there and did what I could with that. It's probably not right, and I am going to have to go back and change that and modify it once we see more pictures of this livery, or at least I can get something or a high resolution picture of my own. So that's usually the way it works. You don't always get it right on the first time, and that's okay. Nothing is set in stone. And it's perfectly okay to go back and modify things whenever you get better reference material. So now I'm just adding little details, adjusting the shadows, adding the gloss down the center of the fuselage there, get that hard reflection, make it look a lot shinier than it would actually be in real life. Because as we know, these airplanes aren't very shiny, but it makes for a good illustration. So that's what I did. And I think I got it. And now I'm moving on to the background. And let me tell you, the background for this illustration, which is something I like to do with all my airline illustrations. I like to create a nice, vivid background. This one was tough. And I started out by taking that vector object that I created of the streamers livery for the tail, and I scaled that way up. And I wanted to use that as just a generic or an abstract texture in the background. And I don't know, I fought with it, and I couldn't quite get something that flowed as nicely as that streamer's livery does. It just looks so good on the tail, but somehow it just wasn't translating well enough to a background. And it was getting to the point where it was just overpowering my aircraft illustrations themselves, which is something I have a problem with. I'm always creating designs that are just way too heavy. I know that. It's just something I can't get away from. But I've kind of got something good going with this design. I like that white and that blue, but I thought maybe it was too distracting and it was just too overpowering, and it was hard to see the actual aircraft themselves on top of that. So I kept going with this, trying to find different ways of using the basic shapes that I had here and just adding layers of color and blending modes and working as fast as I could, and it wasn't going well. It wasn't going well at all. And I had something here that I kind of liked, but then it didn't match the blue of that streamer's livery. It was too dark, and the colors were a little bit off. And by this point, I was getting frustrated. And since this is a time lapse, it's moving really fast. This is probably 30 minutes into the background design so far, and to me, that's just way too long. And I knew I had to just end it. I'm spinning my wheels, and sometimes that's the way it goes. You're never going to get. It can't be perfect all the time, so you just need to call it a wrap when you can. And yeah, I'm going back to that white design now because I don't like this blue version. And long story short, basically what I'm telling you is that this one was frustrating, extremely frustrating. So I've almost reached the point of total frustration now. You know, I don't mind that dark blue. It's okay, but it's just the sweep cutting right down the middle between the two aircraft there. That was really bugging me. And, you know, I could have gone back into Adobe Illustrator and fixed that vector smart object, but that's too much work. I don't want to call myself lazy or anything, but I guess I am a little bit lazy sometimes, especially when it comes to the backgrounds. Anyway, this illustration is about done. I didn't want to use that blue background. I went back to the white, as you see here. This is the final livery, or my final illustration of the JetBlue streamers livery. I'm using that white background, and this is what I'm calling done for now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. The JetBlue livery is very simple, but they do so well with their vertical stabilizer designs and those tails. And someday maybe I'll do a full comparison of them all, of the whole collection. So anyway, if you want full access to my templates at 50% off, all the source files, the PSDs, the vectors, high-resolution PNGs with transparent backgrounds, sign up for the Norebbo discount club. Link in the description below. You'll get 50% off your entire first order. No matter how much you spend, you get 50% off. It's a really good deal. And yeah, if you have any questions on this design, on how I did it, anything in particular, do let me know in the comment section below. I'm fairly responsive, and I'll get back to those comments as soon as I can. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.